Chapter 4. My Interrupted Flight Toward the Himalayas. Leave your classroom on some trifling pretext and engage a hackney carriage. Stop in the lane where no one in my house can see you. These were my final instructions to Amar Miter, a high school friend who planned to accompany me to the Himalayas. We had chosen the following day for our flight. Precautions were necessary, as Ananta exercised a vigilant eye. He was determined to foil the plans of escape which he suspected were uppermost in my mind. The amulet, like a spiritual yeast, was silently at work within me. Amidst the Himalayan snows, I hoped to find the master whose face often appeared to me in visions. The family was living now in Calcutta, where father had been permanently transferred. Following the patriarchal Indian custom, Ananta had brought his bride to live in our home, now at 4 Gupar Road. There, in a small attic room, I engaged in daily meditations and prepared my mind for the divine search. The memorable morning arrived with inauspicious rain. Hearing the wheels of Amar's carriage in the road, I hastily tied together a blanket, a pair of sandals, Lahiri Mahasaya's picture, a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, a string of prayer beads, and 2 loincloths. This bundle I threw from my 3rd-story window. I ran down the steps and passed my uncle, buying fish at the door. "What is the excitement?" His gaze roved suspiciously over my person. I gave him a non-committal smile and walked to the lane. Retrieving my bundle, I joined Amar with conspiratorial caution. We drove to Chandni Chowk, a merchandise center. For months we had been saving our tiffin money to buy English clothes. Knowing that my clever brother could easily play the part of a detective, we thought to outwit him by European garb. On the way to the station, we stopped for my cousin Jotin Ghosh, whom I called Jatinda. He was a new convert, longing for a guru in the Himalayas. He donned the new suit we had in readiness. Well camouflaged, we hoped. A deep elation possessed our hearts. "All we need now are canvas shoes." I led my companions to a shop displaying rubber-soled footwear. Articles of leather, gotten only through the slaughter of animals, must be absent on this holy trip. I halted on the street to remove the leather cover from my Bhagavad Gita and the leather straps from my English-made Sola Topi helmet. At the station, we bought tickets to Burdwan, where we planned to transfer for Hardwar in the Himalayan foothills. As soon as the train, like ourselves, was in flight, I gave utterance to a few of my glorious anticipations. "Just imagine," I ejaculated, "we shall be initiated by the masters and experience the trance of cosmic consciousness. Our flesh will be charged with such magnetism that wild animals of the Himalayas will come tamely near us. Tigers will be no more than meek house cats awaiting our caresses." This remark, picturing a prospect I considered entrancing, both metaphorically and literally, brought an enthusiastic smile from Amar. But Jatinda averted his gaze, directing it through the window at the scampering landscape. "Let the money be divided in 3 portions." Jatinda broke a long silence with this suggestion. "Each of us should buy his own ticket at Burdwan. Thus no one at the station will surmise that we are running away together." I unsuspectingly agreed. At dusk our train stopped at Burdwan. Jatinda entered the ticket office. Amar and I sat on the platform. We waited 15 minutes, then made unavailing inquiries. Searching in all directions, we shouted Jatinda's name with the urgency of fright. But he had faded into the dark unknown surrounding little station. I was completely unnerved, shocked to a peculiar numbness. That God would countenance this depressing episode? The romantic occasion of my first carefully planned flight after him was cruelly marred. "Amar, we must return home." I was weeping like a child. "Jatinda's callous departure is an ill omen. This trip is doomed to failure." "Is this your love for the Lord? Can't you stand the little test of a treacherous companion?" Through Amar's suggestion of a divine test, My heart steadied itself. We refreshed ourselves with famous Burdwan sweetmeats, sitabog, food for the goddess, and moticher, nuggets of sweet pearl. In a few hours, we entrained for Hardwar via Bareilly, changing trains at Mogul Serai. We discussed a vital matter as we waited on the platform. Amar, we may soon be closely questioned by railroad officials. I am not underrating my brother's ingenuity. No matter what the outcome, I will not speak untruth. All I ask of you, Mukunda, is to keep still. Don't laugh or grin while I am talking. At this moment, a European station agent accosted me. He waved a telegram whose import I immediately grasped. Are you running away from home in anger? No. I was glad his choice of words permitted me to make emphatic reply. Not anger, but divinest melancholy was responsible. I knew from my unconventional behavior. The official then turned to Amar. The duel of wits that followed hardly permitted me to maintain the counseled stoic gravity. Where's the third boy? The man injected a full ring of authority into his voice. Come on, speak the truth. Sir, I notice you are wearing eyeglasses. Can't you see that we are only two? Amar smiled impudently. I am not a magician. I can't conjure up a third companion. The official, noticeably disconcerted by this impertinence, sought a new field of attack. What is your name? I am called Tomas. I am the son of an English mother and a converted Christian Indian father. What is your friend's name? I call him Thompson. By this time my inward mirth had reached a zenith. I unceremoniously made for the train, whistling for departure. Amar followed with the official, who was credulous and obliging enough to put us into a European compartment. It evidently pained him to think of two half-English boys traveling in the section allotted to natives. After his polite exit, I lay back on the seat and laughed uncontrollably. My friend wore an expression of blithe satisfaction at having outwitted a veteran European official. On the platform I had contrived to read the telegram. From my brother it went thus: 3 Bengali boys in English clothes running away from home toward Hardwar via Moghul Serai. Please detain them until my arrival. Ample reward for your services. Amar, I told you not to leave marked timetables in your home. My glance was reproachful. Brother must have found one there. My friend sheepishly acknowledged the thrust. We halted briefly in Bareilly, where Dwarka Prasad awaited us with a telegram from Ananta. My old friend tried valiantly to detain us. I convinced him that our flight had not been undertaken lightly. As on a previous occasion, Dwarka refused my invitation to set forth to the Himalayas. While our train stood in a station that night, and I was half asleep, Amar was awakened by another questioning official. He, too, fell a victim to the hybrid charms of Thomas and Thompson. The train bore us triumphantly into a dawn arrival at Hardwar. The majestic mountains loomed invitingly in the distance. We dashed through the station and entered the freedom of city crowds. Our first act was to change into native costume, as Ananta had somehow penetrated our European disguise. A premonition of capture weighed on my mind. Deeming it advisable to leave Hardwar at once, we bought tickets to proceed north to Rishikesh, a soil long hallowed by feet of many masters. I had already boarded the train, while Amar lagged on the platform. He was brought to an abrupt halt by a shout from a policeman. Our unwelcome guardian escorted us to a station bungalow and took charge of our money. He explained courteously that it was his duty to hold us until my elder brother arrived. Learning that the truant's destination had been the Himalayas, the officer related a strange story. I see you are crazy about saints. You will never meet a greater man of God than the one I saw only yesterday. My brother officer and I first encountered him 5 days ago. We were patrolling the Ganges, on a sharp lookout for a certain murderer. Our instructions were to capture him, alive or dead. He was known to be masquerading as a sadhu in order to rob pilgrims. A short way before us we spied a figure which resembled the description of the criminal. He ignored our command to stop. We ran to overpower him. Approaching his back, I wielded my axe with tremendous force. The man's right arm was severed almost completely from his body. Without outcry or any glance at the ghastly wound, the stranger astonishingly continued his swift pace. As we jumped in front of him, he spoke quietly. "I am not the murderer you are seeking." I was deeply mortified to see I had injured the person of a divine-looking sage. Prostrating myself at his feet, I implored his pardon and offered my turban cloth to staunch the heavy spurts of blood. "Son, that was just an understandable mistake on your part." The saint regarded me kindly. "Run along and don't reproach yourself. The beloved mother is taking care of me." He pushed his dangling arm into its stump, and lo! It adhered. The blood inexplicably ceased to flow. "Come to me under yon tree in 3 days, and you will find me fully healed. Thus you will feel no remorse." Yesterday my brother officer and I went eagerly to the designated spot. The sadhu was there and allowed us to examine his arm. It bore no scar or trace of hurt. "I am going via Rishikesh to the Himalayan solitudes." He blessed us as he departed quickly. I feel that my life has been uplifted through his sanctity. The officer concluded with a pious ejaculation. His experience had obviously moved him beyond his usual depths. With an impressive gesture, he handed me a printed clipping about the miracle. In the usual garbled manner of the sensational type of newspaper, not missing, alas, even in India, the reporter's version was slightly exaggerated. It indicated that the sadhu had been almost decapitated. Amar and I lamented we had missed the great yogi who could forgive his persecutor in such a Christ-like way. India, materially poor for the last 2 centuries, yet has an inexhaustible fund of divine wealth. Spiritual skyscrapers may occasionally be encountered by the wayside, even by worldly men like this policeman. We thanked the officer for relieving our tedium with his marvelous story. He was probably intimating that he was more fortunate than we. He had met an illumined saint without effort. Our earnest search had ended, not at the feet of a master, but in a coarse police station. So near the Himalayas and yet in our captivity so far. I told Amar I felt doubly impelled to seek freedom. "Let us slip away when opportunity offers. We can go on foot to the holy Rishikesh." I smiled encouragingly. But my companion had turned pessimist as soon as the stalwart prop of our money had been taken from us. "If we started a trek over such dangerous jungle land, we should finish not in the city of saints, but in the stomachs of tigers." Ananta and Amar's brother arrived after 3 days. Amar greeted his relative with affectionate relief. I was unreconciled. Ananta got no more from me than a severe upbraiding. "I understand how you feel," my brother spoke soothingly. "All I ask of you is to accompany me to Benares to meet a certain saint, and go on to Calcutta to visit your grieving father for a few days. Then you can resume your search here for a master." Amar entered the conversation at this point to disclaim any intention of returning to Hardwar with me. He was enjoying the familial warmth, but I knew I would never abandon the quest for my guru. Our party entrained for Benares. There I had a singular and instant response to my prayers. A clever scheme had been prearranged by Ananta. Before seeing me at Hardwar, he had stopped in Benares to ask a certain scriptural authority to interview me later. Both the pundit and his son had promised to undertake my dissuasion from the path of a sannyasi. Ananta took me to their home. The son, a young man of ebullient manner, greeted me in the courtyard. He engaged me in a lengthy philosophic discourse. Professing to have a clairvoyant knowledge of my future, he discountenanced my idea of being a monk. You will meet continual misfortune and be unable to find God if you insist on deserting your ordinary responsibilities. You cannot work out your past karma without worldly experiences." Krishna's immortal words rose to my lips in reply. Even he, with the worst of karma, who ceaselessly meditates on me, quickly loses the effects of his past bad actions. Becoming a high-soul being, he soon attains perennial peace. Arjuna, know this for certain. The devotee who puts his trust in me never perishes. But the forceful prognostications of the young man had slightly shaken my confidence. With all the fervor of my heart, I prayed silently to God. "Please solve my bewilderment and answer me right here and now, if thou dost desire me to lead the life of a renunciate or a worldly man." I noticed a sadhu of noble countenance standing just outside the compound of the pundit's house. Evidently he had overheard the spirited conversation between the self-styled clairvoyant and myself, for the stranger called me to his side. I felt a tremendous power flowing from his calm eyes. "Son, don't listen to that ignoramus. In response to your prayer, the Lord tells me to assure you that your sole path in this life is that of the renunciate." With astonishment as well as gratitude, I smiled happily at this decisive message. "Come away from that man." The ignoramus was calling me from the courtyard. My saintly guide raised his hand in blessing and slowly departed. "That sadhu is just as crazy as you are." It was the hoary-headed pundit who made this charming observation. He and his son were gazing at me lugubriously. "I heard that he too has left his home in a vague search for God." I turned away. To Ananta I remarked that I would not engage in further discussion with our hosts. My brother agreed to an immediate departure. We soon entrained for Calcutta. "Mr. Detective, how did you discover I had fled with 2 companions?" I vented my lively curiosity to Ananta during our homeward journey. He smiled mischievously. "At your school, I found that Amar had left his classroom and had not returned. I went to his home the next morning and unearthed a marked timetable. Amar's father was just leaving by carriage and was talking to the coachman. 'My son will not ride with me to his school this morning. He has disappeared.' The father moaned. 'I heard from a brother coachman that your son and 2 others dressed in European suits boarded the train at Howrah station,' the man stated. 'They made a present of their leather shoes to the cab driver.' Thus I had 3 clues: the timetable, the trio of boys, and the English clothing." I was listening to Ananta's disclosures with mingled mirth and vexation. Our generosity to the coachman had been slightly misplaced. Of course, I rushed to send telegrams to station officials in all the cities which Amar had underlined in the timetable. He had checked Bareilly, so I wired your friend Dwarka there. After inquiries in our Calcutta neighborhood, I learned that cousin Jatinda had been absent one night but had arrived home the following morning in European garb. I sought him out and invited him to dinner. He accepted, quite disarmed by my friendly manner. On the way, I led him unsuspectingly to a police station. He was surrounded by several officers whom I had previously selected for their ferocious appearance. Under their formidable gaze, Jatinda agreed to account for his mysterious conduct. "I started for the Himalayas in a buoyant spiritual mood," he explained. "Inspiration filled me at the prospect of meeting the masters. But as soon as Mukunda said, 'During our ecstasies in the Himalayan caves, tigers will be spellbound and sit around us like tame pussies,' my spirits froze. Beads of perspiration formed on my brow. What then, I thought, if the vicious nature of the tigers be not changed through the power of our spiritual trance? Shall they treat us with the kindness of house cats? In my mind's eye, I already saw myself the compulsory inmate of some tiger's stomach, entering there not at once with the whole body, but by installments of its several parts. My anger at Jatinda's vanishment was evaporated in laughter. The hilarious sequel on the train was worth all the anguish he had caused me. I must confess to a slight feeling of satisfaction. Jatinda, too, had not escaped an encounter with the police. "Ananta, you are a born sleuth-hound." My glance of amusement was not without some exasperation. "And I shall tell Jatinda I am glad he was prompted by no mood of treachery as it appeared, but only by the prudent instinct of self-preservation." At home in Calcutta, Father touchingly requested me to curb my roving feet until, at least, the completion of my high school studies. In my absence, he had lovingly hatched a plot by arranging for a saintly pundit, Swami Yogananda, to come regularly to the house. "The sage will be your Sanskrit tutor," my parent announced confidently. Father hoped to satisfy my religious yearnings by instructions from a learned philosopher. But the tables were subtly turned. My new teacher, far from offering intellectual aridities, fanned the embers of my God aspiration. Unknown to Father, Swami Yogananda was an exalted disciple of Lahiri Mahasaya. The peerless Guru had possessed thousands of disciples, silently drawn to him by the irresistibility of his divine magnetism. I learned later that Lahiri Mahasaya had often characterized Yogananda as Rishi or illumined sage. Luxuriant curls framed my tutor's handsome face. His dark eyes were guileless, with the transparency of a child's. All the movements of his slight body were marked by a restful deliberation. Ever gentle and loving, he was firmly established in the infinite consciousness. Many of our happy hours together were spent in deep Kriya meditation. Yogananda was a noted authority on the ancient Shastras, or sacred books. His erudition had earned him the title of Shastri Mahasaya, by which he was usually addressed. But my progress in Sanskrit scholarship was unnoteworthy. I sought every opportunity to forsake prosaic grammar and to talk of yoga and Lahiri Mahasaya. My tutor obliged me one day by telling me something of his own life with the master. Rarely fortunate, I was able to remain near Lahiri Mahasaya for 10 years. His Benares home was my nightly goal of pilgrimage. The Guru was always present in a small front parlor on the first floor. As he sat in lotus posture on a backless wooden seat, his disciples garlanded him in a semicircle. His eyes sparkled and danced with the joy of the divine. They were ever half closed, peering through the inner telescopic orb into the sphere of eternal bliss. He seldom spoke at length. Occasionally his gaze would focus on a student in need of help. Healing words poured then like an avalanche of light. An indescribable peace blossomed within me at the master's glance. I was permeated with his fragrance, as though from a lotus of infinity. To be with him, even without exchanging a word for days, was experience which changed my entire being. If any invisible barrier rose in the path of my concentration, I would meditate at the Guru's feet. There the most tenuous states came easily within my grasp. Such perceptions eluded me in the presence of lesser teachers. The Master was a living temple of God, whose secret doors were open to all disciples through devotion. Lahiri Mahasaya was no bookish interpreter of the scriptures. Effortlessly he dipped into the divine library. Foam of words and spray of thoughts gushed from the fountain of his omniscience. He had the wondrous clavis which unlocked the profound philosophical science embedded ages ago in the Vedas. If asked to explain the different planes of consciousness mentioned in the ancient text, he would smilingly assent. "I will undergo those states and presently tell you what I perceive." He was thus diametrically unlike the teachers who commit scripture to memory and then give forth unrealized abstractions. "Please expound the holy stanzas as the meaning occurs to you." The taciturn Guru often gave this instruction to a nearby disciple. "I will guide your thoughts that the right interpretation be uttered. In this way, many of Lahiri Mahasaya's perceptions came to be recorded, with voluminous commentaries by various students. The master never counseled slavish belief. Words are only shells, he said. Win conviction of God's presence through your own joyous contact in meditation. No matter what the disciple's problem, the Guru advised Kriya Yoga for its solution. The yogic key will not lose its efficiency when I am no longer present in the body to guide you. This technique cannot be bound, filed, and forgotten in the manner of theoretical inspirations. Continue ceaselessly on your path to liberation through Kriya, whose power lies in practice. I myself consider Kriya the most effective device of salvation through self-effort ever to be evolved in man's search for the infinite. Kabbalananda concluded with this earnest testimony. Through its use, the omnipotent God, hidden in all men, became visibly incarnated in the flesh of Lahiri Mahasaya and a number of his disciples. A Christ-like miracle by Lahiri Mahasaya took place in Kabbalananda's presence. My saintly tutor recounted the story one day, his eyes remote from the Sanskrit text before us. A blind disciple, Ramu, aroused my active pity. Should he have no light in his eyes when he faithfully served our master, in whom the divine was fully blazing? One morning I sought to speak to Ramu, but he sat for patient hours fanning the Guru with a handmade palm leaf punka. When the devotee finally left the room, I followed him. Ramu, how long have you been blind? From birth, sir. Never have my eyes been blessed with a glimpse of the sun. Our omnipotent Guru can help you. Please make a supplication. The following day, Ramu diffidently approached Lahiri Mahasaya. The disciple felt almost ashamed to ask that physical wealth be added to his spiritual superabundance. Master, the illuminator of the cosmos is in you. I pray you bring his light into my eyes, that I perceive the sun's lesser glow. Ramu, someone has connived to put me in a difficult position. I have no healing power. Sir, the infinite one within you can certainly heal. That is indeed different, Ramu. God's limit is nowhere. He who ignites the stars and the cells of flesh with mysterious life effulgence can surely bring luster of vision into your eyes. The master touched Ramu's forehead at the point between the eyebrows. Keep your mind concentrated there, and frequently chant the name of the prophet Rama for 7 days. The splendor of the sun shall have a special dawn for you. Lo, in 1 week it was so. For the first time Ramu beheld the fair face of nature. The omniscient one had unerringly directed his disciple to repeat the name of Rama, adored by him above all other saints. Ramu's faith was the devotionally plowed soil in which the Guru's powerful seed of permanent healing sprouted. Kabbalananda was silent for a moment, then paid a further tribute to his Guru. It was evident in all miracles performed by Lahiri Mahasaya that he never allowed the ego principle to consider itself a causative force. By perfection of resistless surrender, the Master enabled the prime healing power to flow freely through him. The numerous bodies which were spectacularly healed through Lahiri Mahasaya eventually had to feed the flames of cremation. But the silent spiritual awakenings he effected, the Christ-like disciples he fashioned, are his imperishable miracles. I never became a Sanskrit scholar. Kabbalananda taught me a diviner syntax. Chapter 5. A Perfume Saint displays his wonders. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. I did not have this wisdom of Solomon to comfort me. I gazed searchingly about me. on any excursion from home for the face of my destined guru. But my path did not cross his own until after the completion of my high school studies. 2 years elapsed between my flight with Amar toward the Himalayas and the great day of Sri Yukteswar's arrival into my life. During that interim, I met a number of sages, the Perfume Saint, the Tiger Swami, Nagendranath Baduri, Master Mahasaya, and the famous Bengali scientist Jagadish Chandra Bose. My encounter with the Perfume Saint had 2 preambles, one harmonious and the other humorous. God is simple, everything else is complex. Do not seek absolute values in the relative world of nature. These philosophical finalities gently entered my ear as I stood silently before a temple image of Kali. Turning, I confronted a tall man whose garb, or lack of it, revealed him a wandering sadhu. "You have indeed penetrated the bewilderment of my thoughts," I smiled gratefully. "The confusion of benign and terrible aspects in nature, as symbolized by Kali, has puzzled wiser heads than mine. Few there be who solve her mystery. Good and evil is the challenging riddle which life places sphinx-like before every intelligence. Attempting no solution, most men pay forfeit with their lives. Penalty now even as in the days of Thebes. Here and there, a towering lonely figure never cries defeat. From the Maya of duality he plucks the cleaveless truth of unity." "You speak with conviction, sir." "I have long exercised an honest introspection, the exquisitely painful approach to wisdom. Self-scrutiny, relentless observance of one's thoughts, is a stark and shattering experience. It pulverizes the stoutest ego. But true self-analysis mathematically operates to produce seers. The way of self-expression, individual acknowledgments, results in egoists, sure of the right to their private interpretations of God and the universe. Truth humbly retires, no doubt, before such arrogant originality." I was enjoying the discussion. "Man can understand no eternal verity until he has freed himself from pretensions. The human mind, bared to a centuried slime, is teeming with the repulsive life of countless world delusions. Struggles of the battlefields pale into insignificance here, when man first contends with inward enemies. No mortal foes these, to be overcome by harrowing array of might. Omnipresent, unresting, pursuing man even in sleep, subtly equipped with a miasmic weapon, these soldiers of ignorant lust seek to slay us all. Thoughtless is the man who buries his ideals, surrendering to the common fate. Can he seem other than impotent, wooden, ignominious? Respected sir, have you no sympathy for the bewildered masses?" The sage was silent for a moment, then answered obliquely, "To love both the invisible God, repository of all virtues, and visible man, apparently possessed of none, is often baffling. But ingenuity is equal to the maze. Inner research soon exposes a unity in all human minds, the stalwart kinship of selfish motive. In one sense, at least, the brotherhood of man stands revealed. An aghast humility follows this leveling discovery. It ripens into compassion for one's fellows, blind to the healing potencies of the soul awaiting exploration. The saints of every age, sir, have felt like yourself for the sorrows of the world. Only the shallow man loses responsiveness to the woes of others' lives as he sinks into narrow suffering of his own." The sadhu's austere face was noticeably softened. The one who practices a scalpel self-dissection will know an expansion of universal pity. Release is given to him from the deafening demands of his ego. The love of God flowers on such soil. the creature finally turns to his creator, if for no other reason than to ask in anguish, "Why, Lord, why?" By ignoble whips of pain, man is driven at last into the infinite presence, whose beauty alone should lure him. The sage and I were present in Calcutta's Kaligat temple, whither I had gone to view a famed magnificence. With a sweeping gesture, my chance companion dismissed the ornate dignity. Bricks and mortar sing us no audible tune. The heart opens only to the human chant of being. We strolled to the inviting sunshine at the entrance, where throngs of devotees were passing to and fro. "You are young," the sage surveyed me thoughtfully. "India, too, is young. The ancient rishis laid down ineradicable patterns of spiritual living. Their hoary dictums suffice for this day and land. Not outmoded, but unsophisticated against the guiles of materialism. The disciplinary precepts mold India still, by millenniums more than embarrassed scholars cared to compute. The skeptic time has validated Vedic worth. Take it for your heritage." As I was reverently bidding farewell to the eloquent sadhu, he revealed the clairvoyant perception. "After you leave here today, an unusual experience will come your way." I quitted the temple precincts and wandered along aimlessly. Turning a corner, I ran into an old acquaintance, one of those long-winded fellows whose conversational powers ignore time and embrace eternity. "I will let you go in a short while if you tell me all that has happened during the 6 years of our separation." What a paradox! I must leave you now. But he held me by the hand, forcing out tidbits of information. He was like a ravenous wolf, I thought in amusement. The longer I spoke, the more hungrily he sniffed for news. Inwardly, I petitioned the goddess Kali to devise a graceful means of escape. My companion left me abruptly. I sighed with relief and doubled my pace, dreading any relapse into the garrulous fever. Hearing rapid footsteps behind me, I quickened my speed. I dared not look back, but with a bound the youth rejoined me, jovially clasping my shoulder. "I forgot to tell you of Ganda Baba, Perfume Saint, who is gracing yonder house." He pointed to a dwelling a few yards distant. "Do meet him. He is interesting. You may have an unusual experience. Goodbye." And he actually left me. The similarly worded prediction of the sadhu at Kaligat temple flashed to my mind. Definitely intrigued, I entered the house and was ushered into a commodious parlor. A crowd of people were sitting, Orient-wise, here and there on a thick orange-colored carpet. An odd whisper reached my ear. "Behold, Ganda Baba on the leopard skin. He can give the natural perfume of any flower to a scentless one, or revive a wilted blossom, or make a person's skin exude delightful fragrance." I looked directly at the saint. His quick gaze rested on mine. He was plump and bearded, with dark skin and large, gleaming eyes. "Son, I am glad to see you. Say what you want. Would you like some perfume?" "What for?" I thought his remark rather childish. "To experience the miraculous way of enjoying perfumes." "Harnessing God to make odors? What of it? God makes perfume anyway." "Yes, but he fashions frail bottles of petals for fresh use and discard. Can you materialize flowers?" "I materialize perfumes, little friend." "Then scent factories will go out of business." "I will permit them to keep their trade. My own purpose is to demonstrate the power of God." "Sir, is it necessary to prove God? Isn't he performing miracles in everything, everywhere?" "Yes, but we too should manifest some of his infinite creative variety." "How long did it take you to master your art?" 12 years. "For manufacturing scents by astral means? It seems, my honored saint, you have been wasting a dozen years for fragrances which you can obtain with a few rupees from a florist shop." "Perfumes fade with flowers." "Perfumes fade with death. Why should I desire that which pleases the body only? Mr. Philosopher, you please my mind. Now stretch forth your right hand. He made a gesture of blessing. I was a few feet away from Ganda Baba. No one else was near enough to contact my body. I extended my hand, which the yogi did not touch. What perfume do you want? Rose, be it so. To my great surprise, the charming fragrance of rose was wafted strongly from the center of my palm. I smilingly took a large, white, scentless flower from a nearby vase. Can this odorless blossom be permeated with jasmine? Be it so. A jasmine fragrance instantly shot from the petals. I thanked the wonder worker and seated myself by one of his students. He informed me that Ganda Baba, whose proper name was YOGANANDA, had learned many astonishing yoga secrets from a master in Tibet. The Tibetan yogi, I was assured, had attained the age of over 1,000 years. His disciple Ganda Baba does not always perform his perfume feats in the simple verbal manner you have just witnessed. The student spoke with obvious pride in his master. His procedure differs widely to accord with the diversity in temperaments. He is marvelous. Many members of the Calcutta intelligentsia are among his followers. I inwardly resolved not to add myself to their number. A guru too literally marvelous was not to my liking. With polite thanks to Ganda Baba, I departed. Sauntering home, I reflected on the 3 varied encounters the day had brought forth. My sister Uma met me as I entered our Gurpa Road door. You are getting quite stylish, using perfumes. Without a word, I motioned her to smell my hand. What an attractive rose fragrance! It's unusually strong. Thinking it was strongly unusual, I silently placed the astrally scented blossom under her nostrils. Oh, I love jasmine! She seized the flower. The ludicrous bafflement passed over her face as she repeatedly sniffed the odor of jasmine, from a type of flower she well knew to be scentless. Her reactions disarmed my suspicion that Ganda Baba had induced an auto-suggestive state, whereby I alone could detect the fragrances. Later I heard from a friend, YOGANANDA, that the Perfume Saint had a power which I wish were possessed by the starving millions of Asia and today of Europe as well. I was present with 100 other guests at Ganda Baba's home in Burdwan. YOGANANDA told me it was a gala occasion because the yogi was reputed to have the power of extracting objects out of thin air. I laughingly requested him to materialize some out-of-season tangerines. Immediately, the luchas, which were present on all the banana leaf plates, became puffed up. Each of the bread envelopes proved to contain a peeled tangerine. I bit into my own with some trepidation, but found it delicious. Years later, I understood by inner realization how Ganda Baba accomplished his materializations. The method, alas, is beyond the reach of the world's hungry hordes. The different sensory stimuli to which man reacts, tactual, visual, gustatory, auditory, and olfactory, are produced by vibratory variations in electrons and protons. The vibrations in turn are regulated by lifetrons. Subtle life forces, or finer than atomic energies intelligently charged with the 5 distinctive sensory idea substances. Ganda Baba, tuning himself with the cosmic force by certain yogic practices, was able to guide the lifetrons to rearrange their vibratory structure and objectivize the desired result. His perfume, fruit, and other miracles were actual materializations of mundane vibrations, and not inner sensations hypnotically produced. Performances of miracles such as shown by the Perfume Saint are spectacular but spiritually useless. Having little purpose beyond entertainment, they are digressions from a serious search for God. Hypnotism has been used by physicians in minor operations as a sort of psychical chloroform for persons who might be endangered by anesthetic. but a hypnotic state is harmful to those often subjected to it. A negative psychological effect ensues, which in time deranges the brain cells. Hypnotism is trespass into the territory of another's consciousness. Its temporary phenomena have nothing in common with the miracles performed by men of divine realization. Awakened God, true saints effect changes in this dream world by means of a will harmoniously attuned to the creative cosmic dreamer. Ostentatious display of unusual powers are decried by masters. The Persian mystic Abu Sa'id once laughed at certain fakirs who were proud of their miraculous powers over water, air, and space. The frog is also at home in the water, Abu Sa'id pointed out in gentle scorn. The crow and the vulture easily fly in the air. The devil is simultaneously present in the east and the west. A true man is he who dwells in righteousness among his fellow men, who buys and sells, yet is never for a single instant forgetful of God. On another occasion, the great Persian teacher gave his views on the religious life thus: to lay aside what you have in your head, selfish desires and ambitions, to freely bestow what you have in your hand, and never to flinch from the blows of adversity. Neither the impartial sage at Kalighat Temple nor the Tibetan-trained yogi had satisfied my yearning for a guru. My heart needed no tutor for its recognitions, and cried its own bravos, the more resoundingly because often summoned from silence. When I finally met my master, he taught me by sublimity of example alone the measure of a true man. Chapter 6. The Tiger Swami. I have discovered the Tiger Swami's address. Let us visit him tomorrow. This welcome suggestion came from Chandi, one of my high school friends. I was eager to meet the saint who, in his pre-monastic life, had caught and fought tigers with his naked hands. A boyish enthusiasm over such remarkable feats was strong within me. The next day dawned wintry cold, but Chandi and I sallied forth gaily. After much vain hunting in Bhawanipur, outside Calcutta, we arrived at the right house. The door held 2 iron rings, which I sounded piercingly. Notwithstanding the clamor, a servant approached with leisurely gait. His ironical smile implied that visitors, despite their noise, were powerless to disturb the calmness of a saint's home. Feeling the silent rebuke, my companion and I were thankful to be invited into the parlor. Our long wait there caused uncomfortable misgivings. India's unwritten law for the truth-seeker is patience. A master may purposely make a test of one's eagerness to meet him. This psychological ruse is freely employed in the West by doctors and dentists. Finally summoned by the servant, Chandi and I entered a sleeping apartment. The famous Sohong Swami was seated on his bed. The sight of his tremendous body affected us strangely. With bulging eyes, we stood speechless. We had never before seen such a chest or such football-like biceps. On an immense neck, the Swami's fierce yet calm face was adorned with flowing locks, beard, and mustache. A hint of dove-like and tiger-like qualities shone in his dark eyes. He was unclothed, save for a tiger skin about his muscular waist. Finding our voices, my friend and I greeted the monk, expressing our admiration for his prowess in the extraordinary feline arena. Will you not tell us, please, how it is possible to subdue with bare fists the most ferocious of jungle beasts, the Royal Bengals? My sons, it is nothing to me to fight tigers. I could do it today if necessary. He gave a childlike laugh. You look upon tigers as tigers. I know them as pussycats. Swamiji, I think I could impress my subconsciousness with the thought that tigers were pussycats, but could I make tigers believe it? Of course, strength is also necessary. One cannot expect victory from a baby who imagines a tiger to be a house cat. Powerful hands are my sufficient weapon." He asked us to follow him to the patio, where he struck the edge of a wall. A brick crashed to the floor. The sky peered boldly through the gaping, lost tooth of the wall. I fairly staggered in astonishment. He who can remove mortared bricks from a solid wall with one blow, I thought, must surely be able to displace the teeth of tigers. A number of men have physical power such as mine, but still lack in cool confidence. Those who are boldly but not mentally stalwart may find themselves fainting at mere sight of a wild beast bounding freely in the jungle. The tiger, in its natural ferocity and habitat, is vastly different from the opium-fed circus animal. Many a man with Herculean strength has nonetheless been terrorized into abject helplessness before the onslaught of a royal Bengal. Thus the tiger has converted the man in his own mind to a state as nerveless as the pussycats. It is possible for a man owning a fairly strong body and an immensely strong determination to turn the tables on the tiger and force it to a conviction of pussycat defenselessness. I often have done just that. I was quite willing to believe that the titan before me was able to perform the tiger-pussycat metamorphosis. He seemed in a didactic mood. Chandi and I listened respectfully. Mind is the wielder of muscles. The force of a hammer blow depends on the energy applied. The power expressed by a man's bodily instrument depends on his aggressive will and courage. The body is literally manufactured and sustained by mind. Through pressure of instincts from past lives, strengths or weaknesses percolate gradually into human consciousness. They express as habits, which in turn ossify into a desirable or an undesirable body. Outward frailty has mental origin. In a vicious circle, the habit-bound body thwarts the mind. If the master allows himself to be commanded by a servant, the latter becomes autocratic. The mind is similarly enslaved by submitting to bodily dictation. At our entreaty, the impressive Swami consented to tell us something of his own life. My earliest ambition was to fight tigers. My will was mighty, but my body was feeble. An ejaculation of surprise broke from me. It appeared incredible that this man, now with Atlantean shoulders fit to bear, could ever have known weakness. It was by indomitable persistency in thoughts of health and strength that I overcame my handicap. I have every reason to extol the compelling mental vigor which I found to be the real subduer of royal Bengals. Do you think, Revered Swami, that I could ever fight tigers? This was the first and the last time that the bizarre ambition ever visited my mind. Yes, he was smiling. But there are many kinds of tigers. Some roam in jungles of human desires. No spiritual benefit accrues by knocking beasts unconscious. Rather, be victor over the inner prowlers. May we hear, sir, how you changed from a tamer of wild tigers to a tamer of wild passions? The tiger Swami fell into silence. Remoteness came into his gaze. Summoning visions of bygone years, I discerned his slight mental struggle to decide whether to grant my request. Finally he smiled in acquiescence. When my fame reached a zenith, it brought the intoxication of pride. I decided not only to fight tigers, but to display them in various tricks. My ambition was to force savage beasts to behave like domesticated ones. I began to perform my feats publicly with gratifying success. One evening my father entered my room in pensive mood. Son, I have words of warning. I would save you from coming ills produced by the grinding wheels of cause and effect. Are you a fatalist, father? Should superstition be allowed to discolor the powerful waters or my activities? I am no fatalist, son, but I believe in the just law of retribution as taught in the Holy Scriptures. There is resentment against you in the jungle, family. Sometime it may act to your cost. Father, you astonish me. You know well what tigers are, beautiful but merciless. Even immediately after an enormous meal of some hapless creature, a tiger is fired with fresh lust at sight of a new prey. It may be a jealous gazelle, frisking over the jungle grass. Capturing it and biting an opening in the soft throat, the malevolent beast tastes only a little of the mutely crying blood and goes its wanton way. Tigers are the most contemptible of the jungle breed. Who knows, my blows may inject some slight sanity of consideration into their thick heads. I am headmaster in a forest finishing school to teach them gentle manners. Please, Father, think of me as tiger tamer and never as tiger killer. How could my good actions bring ill upon me? I beg you not to impose any command that I change my way of life. Chandi and I were all attention, understanding the past dilemma. In India, a child does not lightly disobey his parents' wishes. In stoic silence, Father listened to my explanation. He followed it with the disclosure which he uttered gravely. Son, you compel me to relate an ominous prediction from the lips of a saint. He approached me yesterday as I sat on the veranda in my daily meditation. Dear friend, I come with the message for your belligerent son. Let him cease his savage activities. Otherwise his next tiger encounter shall result in his severe wounds, followed by 6 months of deathly sickness. He shall then forsake his former ways and become a monk. This tale did not impress me. I considered that Father had been the credulous victim of a deluded fanatic. The tiger Swami made this confession with an impatient gesture, as though it's some stupidity. Grimly silent for a long time, he seemed oblivious of our presence. When he took up the dangling thread of his narrative, it was suddenly with subdued voice. Not long after Father's warning, I visited the capital city of Cooch Behar. The picturesque territory was new to me, and I expected a restful change. As usual, everywhere, a curious crowd followed me in the streets. I would catch bits of whispered comment. This is the man who fights wild tigers. He has legs or tree trunks. Look at his face. He must be an incarnation of the king of tigers himself. You know how village urchins function like final editions of a newspaper. With what speed do the even later speech bulletins of the women circulate from house to house? Within a few hours, the whole city was in a state of excitement over my presence. I was relaxing quietly in the evening when I heard the hoofbeats of galloping horses. They stopped in front of my dwelling place. In came a number of tall, turbaned policemen. I was taken aback. All things are possible unto these creatures of human law, I thought. I wonder if they are going to take me to task about matters utterly unknown to me. But the officers bowed with unwonted courtesy. Honored sir, we are sent to welcome you on behalf of the Prince of Cooch Behar. He is pleased to invite you to his palace tomorrow morning. I speculated a while on the prospect. For some obscure reason, I felt sharp regret at this interruption in my quiet trip, but the suppliant manner of the policeman moved me. I agreed to go. I was bewildered the next day to be obsequiously escorted from my door into a magnificent coach drawn by 4 horses. A servant held an ornate umbrella to protect me from the scorching sunlight. I enjoyed the pleasant ride through the city and its woodland outskirts. The royal scion himself was at the palace door to welcome me. He proffered his own gold-brocaded seat, smilingly placing himself in a chair of simpler design. All this politeness is certainly going to cost me something, I thought in mounting astonishment. The prince's motive emerged after a few casual remarks. My city is filled with the rumor that you can fight wild tigers with nothing more than your naked hands. Is it a fact?" "It is quite true." "I can scarcely believe it. You are a Calcutta Bengali, nurtured on the white rice of city folk. Be frank, please. Have you not been fighting only spineless, opium-fed animals?" His voice was loud and sarcastic, tinged with provincial accent. I vouchsafed no reply to his insulting question. "I challenge you to fight my newly caught tiger, Raja Begum. If you can successfully resist him, bind him with a chain and leave his cage in a conscious state, you shall have this royal Bengal. Several thousand rupees and many other gifts shall also be bestowed. If you refuse to meet him in combat, I shall blazon your name throughout the state as an impostor." His insolent words struck me like a volley of bullets. I shot an angry acceptance. Half risen from the chair in his excitement, the prince sank back with a sadistic smile. I was reminded of the Roman emperors who delighted in setting Christians in bestial areas. "The match will be set for a week hence. I regret that I cannot give you permission to view the tiger in advance." Whether the prince feared I might seek to hypnotize the beast or secretly feed him opium, I know not. I left the palace, noting with amusement that the royal umbrella, panoplied coach was now missing. The following week I methodically prepared my mind and body for the coming ordeal. Through my servant I learned of fantastic tales. The saint's direful prediction to my father had somehow got abroad, enlarging as it ran. Many simple villagers believed that an evil spirit, cursed by the gods, had reincarnated as a tiger which took various demoniac forms at night, but remained a striped animal during the day. This demon tiger was supposed to be the one sent to humble me. Another imaginative version was that animal prayers to Tiger Heaven had achieved a response in the shape of Raja Begum. He was to be the instrument to punish me, the audacious biped so insulting to the entire tiger species. A furless, fangless man daring to challenge a claw-armed, sturdy-limbed tiger. The concentrated venom of all humiliated tigers, the villagers declared, had gathered momentum sufficient to operate hidden laws and bring about the fall of the proud tiger tamer. My servant further apprised me that the prince was in his element as manager of the bout between man and beast. He had supervised the erection of a storm-proof pavilion designed to accommodate thousands. Its center held Raja Begum in an enormous iron cage, surrounded by an outer safety room. The captive emitted a ceaseless series of blood-curdling roars. He was fed sparingly to kindle a wrathful appetite. Perhaps the prince expected me to be the meal of reward. Crowds from the city and suburbs bought tickets eagerly in response to the beat of drums announcing the unique contest. The day of battle saw hundreds turned away for lack of seats. Many men broke through the tent openings or crowded any space below the galleries. As the tiger Swami's story approached a climax, my excitement mounted with it. Chandi also was rapidly mute. Amidst piercing sound explosions from Raja Begum and the hubbub of the somewhat terrified crowd, I quietly made my appearance. Scantily clad around the waist, I was otherwise unprotected by clothing. I opened the bolt on the door of the safety room and calmly locked it behind me. The tiger sensed blood. Leaping with the thunderous crash on his bars, he sent forth a fearsome welcome. The audience was hushed with pitiful fear. I seemed a meek lamb before the raging beast. In a trice, I was within the cage, but as I slammed the door, Raja Begum was headlong upon me. My right hand was desperately torn. Human blood, the greatest treat a tiger can know, fell in appalling streams. The prophecy of the saint seemed about to be fulfilled. I rallied instantly from the shock of the first serious injury I had ever received, banishing the sight of my gory fingers by thrusting them beneath my waistcloth. I swung my arm in a bone-cracking blow. The beast reeled back, swirled around the rear of the cage, and sprang forward convulsively. My famous fistic punishment rained on his head. But Raja Begum's taste of blood had acted like the maddening first sip of wine to a dipsomaniac long deprived. Punctuated by a deafening roar, the brute's assaults grew in fury. My inadequate defense of only one hand left me vulnerable before claws and fangs. But I dealt out dazing retribution. Mutually ensanguined, we struggled as to the death. The cage was pandemonium, as blood splashed in all directions, and blasts of pain and lethal lust came from the bestial throat. "Shoot him! Kill the tiger!" shrieks arose from the audience. So fast did man and beast move that a guard's bullet went amiss. I mustered all my will force, bellowed fiercely, and landed a final concussive blow. The tiger collapsed and lay quietly. "Like a pussycat," I interjected. The Swami laughed in hearty appreciation, then continued the engrossing tale. Raja Begum was vanquished at last. His royal pride was further humbled. With my lacerated hands, I audaciously forced open his jaws. For a dramatic moment, I held my head within the yawning death trap. I looked around for a chain. Pulling one from a pile on the floor, I bound the tiger by his neck to the cage bars. In triumph, I moved toward the door. But that fiend incarnate, Raja Begum, had stamina worthy of his supposed demoniac origin. With an incredible lunge, he snapped the chain and leaped on my back, my shoulder fast in his jaws. I fell violently, but in a trice I had him pinned beneath me. Under merciless blows, the treacherous animal sank into semi-consciousness. This time I secured him more carefully. Slowly, I left the cage. I found myself in a new uproar, this time one of delight. The crowd's cheer broke as though from a single gigantic throat. Disastrously mauled, I had yet fulfilled the three conditions of the fight: stunning the tiger, binding him with the chain, and leaving him without requiring assistance for myself. In addition, I had so drastically injured and frightened the aggressive beast that he had been content to overlook the opportune prize of my head in his mouth. After my wounds were treated, I was honored and garlanded. Hundreds of gold pieces showered at my feet. The whole city entered a holiday period. Endless discussions were heard on all sides about my victory over one of the largest and most savage tigers ever seen. Raja Begum was presented to me as promised, but I felt no elation. A spiritual change had entered my heart. It seemed that with my final exit from the cage had also closed the door on my worldly ambitions. A woeful period followed. For 6 months, I lay near death from blood poisoning. As soon as I was able enough to leave Cooch Behar, I returned to my native town. I know now that my teacher is the holy man who gave the wise warning. I humbly made this confession to my father. Oh, if I could only find him! My longing was sincere, for one day the saint arrived unheralded. "Enough of tiger taming," he spoke with calm assurance. "Come with me. I will teach you to subdue the beasts of ignorance roaming in the jungles of the human mind. You are used to an audience. Let it be the galaxy of angels, entertained by your thrilling mastery of yoga." I was initiated into the spiritual path by my saintly guru. he opened my soul doors, rusty and resistant with long disuse. Hand in hand, we soon set out for my training in the Himalayas. Chandi and I bowed at the Swami's feet, grateful for his vivid outline of a life truly cyclonic. I felt amply repaid for the long probationary wait in the cold parlor. Chapter 7. The Levitating Saint. I saw a yogi remain in the air, several feet above the ground, last night at a group meeting. My friend Upendra Mohun Chaudhuri spoke impressively. I gave him an enthusiastic smile. Perhaps I can guess his name. Was it Baduri Mahasaya of Upper Circular Road? Upendra nodded, a little crestfallen not to be a news-bearer. My inquisitiveness about saints was well known among my friends. They delighted in setting me on a fresh track. The yogi lives so close to my home that I often visit him. My words brought keen interest to Upendra's face, and I made a further confidence. I have seen him in remarkable feats. He has expertly mastered the various pranayamas of the ancient eightfold yoga outlined by Patanjali. Once Baduri Mahasaya performed the Bastrika pranayama before me with such amazing force that it seemed an actual storm had arisen in the room. Then he extinguished the thundering breath and remained motionless in a high state of superconsciousness. The aura of peace after the storm was vivid beyond forgetting. I heard that the saint never leaves his home. Upendra's tone was a trifle incredulous. Indeed, it is true, he has lived indoors for the past 20 years. He slightly relaxes his self-imposed rule at the times of our holy festivals, when he goes as far as his front sidewalk. The beggars gather there, because Saint Baduri is known for his tender heart. How does he remain in the air, defying the law of gravitation? A yogi's body loses its grossness after use of certain pranayamas. Then it will levitate or hop about like a leaping frog. Even saints who do not practice a formal yoga have been known to levitate during a state of intense devotion to God. I would like to know more of this sage. Do you attend his evening meetings? Upendra's eyes were sparkling with curiosity. Yes, I often go. I am vastly entertained by the wit in his wisdom. Occasionally my prolonged laughter mars the solemnity of his gatherings. The saint is not displeased, but his disciples look daggers. On my way home from school that afternoon, I passed Baduri Mahasaya's cloister and decided on a visit. The yogi was inaccessible to the general public. A lone disciple occupying the ground floor guarded his master's privacy. The student was something of a martinet. He now inquired formally if I had an engagement. His guru put in an appearance just in time to save me from summary ejection. Let Mukunda come when he will. The sage's eyes twinkled. My rule of seclusion is not for my own comfort, but for that of others. Worldly people do not like the candor which shatters their delusions. Saints are not only rare but disconcerting. Even in Scripture, they are often found embarrassing. I followed Baduri Mahasaya to his austere quarters on the top floor, from which he seldom stirred. Masters often ignore the panorama of the world's ado, out of focus till centered in the ages. The contemporaries of a sage are not alone those of the narrow present. Maharashi, you are the first yogi I have known who always stays indoors. God plants his saints sometimes in unexpected soil, lest we think we may reduce him to a rule. The sage locked his vibrant body in the lotus posture. In his 70s, he displayed no unpleasing signs of age or sedentary life. Stalwart and straight, he was ideal in every respect. His face was that of a rishi, as described in the ancient texts. Noble-headed, abundantly bearded, he always sat firmly upright, his quiet eyes fixed on omnipresence. The saint and I entered the meditative state. After an hour, his gentle voice roused me. "You go often into silence, but have you developed anubhava?" He was reminding me to love God more than meditation. Do not mistake the technique for the goal. He offered me some mangoes. With that good-humored wit that I found so delightful in his grave nature, he remarked, "People in general are more fond of Jala Yoga, union with food, than of Dhyana Yoga, union with God." His yogic pun affected me uproariously. "What a laugh you have!" An affectionate gleam came into his gaze. His own face was always serious, yet touched with an ecstatic smile. His large lotus eyes held a hidden divine laughter. "Those letters come from far-off America." The sage indicated several thick envelopes on a table. "I correspond with a few societies there whose members are interested in yoga. They are discovering India anew, with a better sense of direction than Columbus. I am glad to help them. The knowledge of yoga is free to all who will receive, like the ungarnishable daylight. What rishis perceived as essential for human salvation need not be diluted for the West. Alike in soul, though diverse in outer appearance, neither West nor East will flourish if some form of disciplinary yoga be not practiced." The saint held me with his tranquil eyes. I did not realize that his speech was a veiled prophetic guidance. It is only now, as I write these words, that I understand the full meaning in the casual intimations he often gave me, that someday I would carry India's teachings to America. "Sir," I inquired, "why do you not write a book on yoga for the benefit of the world?" "I am training disciples," he replied. "They and their students will be living volumes, proof against the natural disintegration of time and the unnatural interpretations of the critics." "Maharshi, I wish you would write a book on yoga for the benefit of the world." "I am training disciples. They and their students will be living volumes, proof against the natural disintegrations of time and the unnatural interpretations of the critics." Baduri's wit put me into another gale of laughter. I remained alone with the yogi until his disciples arrived in the evening. Baduri Mahasaya entered one of his inimitable discourses. Like a peaceful flood, he swept away the mental debris of his listeners, floating them Godward. His striking parables were expressed in a flawless Bengali. This evening Baduri expounded various philosophical points connected with the life of Mirabai, a medieval Rajputani princess who abandoned her court life to seek the company of sadhus. One great sannyasi refused to receive her because she was a woman. Her reply brought him humbly to her feet. "Tell the master," she had said, "that I did not know there was any male in the universe save God. Are we all not females before him?" A scriptural conception of the Lord as the only positive creative principle is creation, being naught but a passive maya. Mirabai composed many ecstatic songs which are still treasured in India. I translate one of them here. "If by bathing daily God could be realized, sooner would I be a whale in the deep. If by eating roots and fruits he could be known, gladly would I choose the form of a goat. If the counting of rosaries uncovered him, I would say my prayers on mammoth beads. If bowing before stone images unveiled him, a flinty mountain I would humbly worship. If by drinking milk the Lord could be imbibed, many cows and children would know him. If abandoning one's wife would summon God, would not thousands be eunuchs? Mirabai knows that to find the Divine One, the only indispensable is love." Several students put rupees in Baduri's slippers which lay by his side as he sat in yoga posture. This respectful offering, customary in India, indicates that the disciple places his material goods at the Guru's feet. Grateful friends are only the Lord in disguise, looking after his own. Master, you are wonderful. A student taking his leave gazed ardently at the patriarchal sage. You have renounced riches and comforts to seek God and teach us wisdom. It was well known that Bhaduri Mahasaya had forsaken great family wealth in his early childhood when single-mindedly he entered the yogic path. You are reversing the case. The saint's face held a mild rebuke. I have left a few paltry rupees, a few petty pleasures, for a cosmic empire of endless bliss. How then have I denied myself anything? I know the joy of sharing the treasure. Is that a sacrifice? The short-sighted worldly folk are verily the real renunciates. They relinquish an unparalleled divine possession for a poor handful of earthly toys. I chuckled over this paradoxical view of renunciation, one which puts the cap of Croesus on any saintly beggar, whilst transforming all proud millionaires into unconscious martyrs. The divine order arranges our future more wisely than any insurance company. The Master's concluding words were the realized creed of his faith. The world is full of uneasy believers in an outward security. Their bitter thoughts are like scars on their foreheads. The one who gave us air and milk from our first breath knows how to provide day by day for his devotees. I continued my after-school pilgrimages to the saint's door. With silent zeal, he aided me to attain Anubhava. One day he moved to Ram Mohan Roy Road, away from the neighborhood of my Gurpar Road home. His loving disciples had built him a new hermitage, known as Nagendra Mat. Although it throws me ahead of my story by a number of years, I will recount here the last words given to me by Bhaduri Mahasaya. Shortly before I embarked for the West, I sought him out and humbly knelt for his farewell blessing. Son, go to America. Take the dignity of hoary India for your shield. Victory is written on your brow. The noble distant people will well receive you.